All right, guys, without further ado, John O'Neill, uh, we're ready when you are.
Hello. I guess it's funny because I guess I could say, "Can everyone hear me?" But then everyone have to unmute and speak. So don't do that. I think I'm in the main chat session, the Power Up main stage. So hello. People are all typing. Oh, this is cool. I like it. Well, I'm a little echoey. Let me see if I can de-echoify. I'm in a big vaulted room that has a steel door on it. I'm hiding. I'll do it. Yeah, it will. Indeed, indeed. So I'll try to speak directly to the mic as much as possible. And if you all have questions, obviously chime in because the funniest thing with me is I typically go off tangent all the time, and that's half the fun. Because holy cow, you know, games and doing this as a full-time career. I'll tell you a funny story because that's what this is all about: funny stories and bears and wrestling and stuff. I've actually been in the industry for about 20 years, amazingly enough, and somehow survived it. Started back in the early 90s and in the time when Microprose software still existed, and a company that Sid Meier started. And I got into the industry by answering 3 Monty Python questions correctly. And I kid you not, it had nothing to do with my skills or lack thereof of programming, because I was a computer science major at NC State. And I happened to hear about this junior programmer job at a little studio, a satellite studio called Microprose in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So I went out there and was chatting with the managing director and met some of the engineers and one of the guys that I knew from college. And he basically just wanted to know, my interest in writing code and had nothing to do with games. It's just, you like writing code, you like programming, you do what you do. And I'll do that in the background here as we're talking. So nothing really much about anything that has to do with video game development or what I had played, but more the movies that I've watched and the culture that I followed and what my name was, which I thought was silly. Yeah, echo cancellation is actually on, so I'll try to keep it a little less echoey if possible. But name was kind of a stupid one because I knew my name. Uh, my quest was kind of a silly one as well. It was just like, well, I'm looking for a job, not really looking for Holy Grail or anything. But then blammo, I kind of caught it and realized, all right, you're just asking me some pop culture questions. And then the favorite color one, fortunately, at the moment in time, in my life, I'd actually watched that movie very recently. So had the favorite color of red, no blue, and the rest is history. And I kid you not, that's exactly how I started in the industry, and I should have realized at that time how batshit crazy this industry really is, because it started in the early days, it was Wild West. And in some ways, we returned to that, not for the worst. In the beginning, working on a team, and at the time, the project I was assigned to was Civilization 2 and Colonization for Windows. And we had probably 15 people working on those projects separately. And then Civ 2 ramped up and we probably topped off 35, 40 people with the studio up in Hunt Valley. And as time went on, the size of teams grew. But fortunately, I always started working with a very small team in Chapel Hill. And I don't think we ever went more than 15 people at the main studio. But that really gave me a kind of I don't want to call it indie, I want to call it small, intentionally. I avoid using the term indie for a couple of different reasons, because I'm jaded, and not in a bad way, but I look at things a little differently, having been in the industry for a long time. I also don't like using the word gamification, because I think that's complete marketing bullshit. Hey, we're talking about marketing, so yeah, avoid that word if you can. Yeah, I'm in North Carolina, so my studio is in Cary, North Carolina, just west of Raleigh. And Microprose had a studio here in North Carolina as well, until they shut it down after Hasbro bought them in 2000. And I had left, moved to Austin, and was working with another team out there. And it's interesting the changes that happen because of the industry, or more importantly, because of business. And we often talk about the chaos of the game industry, but for anyone who's ever worked for any other jobs, it's no different industry to industry. There's a big unknown, and ultimately one of my decisions for starting the company over 8 years ago was to be in a little bit more control of the chaos. But that chaos is always going to happen. It doesn't matter if it's games, doesn't matter if it's widgets, doesn't matter if it's fast food. There are always things that are going to affect you. And so coming back to when I started rambling on for a moment about indie, when the term indie came out many years ago, a lot of people associated it with more of an artistic movement for creating games. And as much as I love that, because I do love games, God knows I've made a career out of it, one of the things that you need to remember about business, it's not being evil. If you don't make money as a business, your business does not continue, and you don't continue doing that. And that really stinks. I tried working for a very large semiconductor company at one time, as in the midst of a layoff that occurred from Microprose, and that was just boring as hell. So I came back, and again, starting the business was to manage the chaos and being more in control of what you wanted to do in life. But I enjoy, games as a business and games as a gamer, and those are two very different things. It doesn't take much to browse at some of the things that I've done, with this latest company, which was not Microprose, which was not Vicious Cycle. It's Sparkplug Games. And we did a tremendous number of casual games in the beginning that we had no interest whatsoever in doing as gamers. But from a business perspective, we took the work so that we could continue doing what we wanted to do for a living. And I think oftentimes, I'm just as guilty of this, even knowing people in the industry. I question, some of the development decisions that people make in building games. And we have to remember that, many things, it's not that they're out of our control, but it's if you want to continue going back to that key point, you're running a business, you have to make money. If you don't make money, you don't exist. And it stinks. But, some of us have mortgages, some of us have various bills, student loans, car payments, all those boring things. And if you don't have any of those, well, heck, you want to build a really nice gaming machine, that takes money. And if it takes money, unless you're a really good bank robber, you're going to need to get a job. And if you want to get a job in this industry, well, times have changed now. I'll bounce all over the place. But one of the things I think, I don't know if this is in one of the overview sections of what I put on there, about what I was going to be rambling on, but oftentimes I'll talk to people about why they shouldn't be a game developer, why they should avoid getting into this industry in the first place. It's not, if you love games, that doesn't mean you should make games. I love movies. I love going to movies. There's no way in hell I would ever go make movies for a living, for a couple of reasons. One, I'm probably not very good at it. And two, I lose a lot of the magic in the suspension of disbelief in the fourth wall. And I prefer to go for entertainment purposes. And so games are no different, in some ways worse, because the entertainment lasts longer. When you start making games, if you've been playing games all your life, which I had been, back to the days of Commodore 64 and Atari 2600, some of the magic of what made games fun was lost because it changed. You spend more time subconsciously, eventually, looking at the mechanics of a game and breaking it down to understand, how it was done, the decisions that were made, things that you can learn that you can use as a developer and use for your own games, and less on the sheer enjoyment factor of playing games. And so that's a huge, huge thing to consider if you were just about to look into doing it professionally for a living. That's not to say you can't do it as a hobbyist, or what I would have said as an indie. Now, doing it as an independent developer, where it's not your livelihood, it's not keeping you alive, then you don't have to worry if, you know, the game idea or the concepts that you're experimenting with are not feasible financially. You know, you're not going to sell 1 billion copies or even 1,000 copies, and it doesn't matter. But if you're making decisions that other people are depending upon, like, I don't know, if you hire people and you have a company where you pay employment taxes and healthcare and overhead and machine costs and licensing fees and insurance, you know, all these things add up. And these are things that really get in the way of the fun element of making the games, which is making the games. So it's interesting for me looking at, you know, what I did 20 years ago as a programmer, and all I did for 8 to 12 hours a day was wrote code, and I was happy. I enjoyed it. And then, you know, as time went on and I became better at doing that, I had different responsibilities given to me. And eventually I stumbled into the business side quite accidentally and thought, well, you know, that's a logical progression. You know, if I want to be more successful, I will move into the business side. And then more of your time is taken. You know, once time has passed, you can't get it back. You can't go back and spend the time coding the way you wanted to, unless someone knows, you know, Doc Emmett Brown, you know how to get that time machine working, which I'd love to meet him, but you know, you've got to balance everything. And so for me in running a business, you know, and still as a small studio, I'm often at odds with my day-to-day activities. I don't have a schedule that I follow every day because there's, you know, anything from social media outreach that, you know, I may have to get involved with, to managing projects internally, to managing external relations with publishers or licensors or large studios or movie companies that own licenses for things that we'd love to continue working on. I'm not going to talk about that. But getting back down to the, you know, the fun of making games, you know, I still love doing that. I love getting back into it when I have the time, and it's definitely not as much time as it used to be. So think about that. You know, if you're trying to build even a small studio, call it an indie studio. You know, if there's some of you working on the engineering side, then some of you should be working on the art side, and hopefully someone's got a design idea. Someone has to be outwardly facing. Someone has to take the reins of the business and the business opportunities. Otherwise, you'll miss out. You won't see them, and you may not falter or fail, but you certainly will have a harder time becoming credible. Is probably a good word in the industry with publishers. And even if you're not going for publishing deals as a small indie developer, you still need to have the relationships. You know, building relationships, I think, is one of the critical soft skills that people take for granted in the game industry. If you're not in the industry, thinking, you know, one, we just play games for a living, which, yeah, sure, we do play a lot of games for a living, yeah. But then two, there's a tremendous amount that has to go into what it takes to build these games, and it's not, use a bad pun, not all fun and games. Because of all of the elements that come along with, you know, running a business. And I don't have a business background. It's simply the, you know, the 8 years of trials and tribulations dealing with the managed chaos. And I love every second of it. You know, I don't think I could go back and do anything else, quite honestly. I don't think I could, you know, return to a 9-to-5 job and be happy. And I certainly have tried that, but the sacrifices I've made were very intentional to continue doing what I love. And, you know, it's a rough time publishing and being independent and trying to get the message out about products that you build. And I certainly can touch on that a little bit with our latest game, Mechrunner, which, you know, holy cow, it's 3 years in the making, but it didn't take us 3 years to build it. I want to sip my coffee strategically for a brief pause. Ooh. So doing a lot of those games in the early days, and we've worked on over 60 products. Some of them were never intentionally marketed as Sparkplug Games products because they were done for large companies or other publishers and rebranded with their own names. But many of the early projects were intentionally taken to build enough of a revenue stream to allow us to build the games that we wanted to build. And myself and some of the founders, many years back, actually worked on some of the early Robotech Battlecry and Robotech Invasion games for Xbox and PlayStation and GameCube. And they're absolutely fantastic, fun games to build and fun games to play. And so getting kind of back to our roots of being gamers and wanting to do something that we thought would do well enough on the market, but almost more importantly, would be fun for us to work on, as opposed to some of the casual titles and the mobile titles that we'd spent a lot of our time on. And so we very quickly designed kind of an arcade-style runner in more of the traditional arcade mode of play, as opposed to the endless runners that were popular on mobile phones at the time. We put a design together and partnered with a friend from Marvel Studios who does a lot of work on all the Avengers and Captain America and Iron Man movies, and did a quick pitch to Steam as well as to Unity. And Unity at the time was opening a publishing division, and hence the importance of maintaining those strong relationships. I had really, even though we weren't doing work with some of these publishers, I'd intentionally stay very close to them just to understand when the opportunities might be opening up and when we might potentially need to use that relationship to our benefit. And that absolutely was the case with MechRunner when we reached out to Unity to see if there was interest in signing this as one of their launch titles. Very quickly moved into negotiations, and Unity Games, as the publishing wing, signed us as one of the first 5. And so we spent about a year and a half with them working on that game as the Unity game engine moved between version 3 to version 4. And it was a great relationship. Unfortunately, Unity Games decided to end their publishing division because they realized they were an engine company and not a game publisher. And so we were about 70% done with the project and decided to part ways in friendly terms, but you never want to burn your bridges. And so we were left with a near completed game, but not completed game, and hesitantly opted to do a small Kickstarter to finish the game, which, that's, I can do a whole session on Kickstarter separate from this. If anyone has specific questions, I'm happy to go down that road as well. But, all things said and done, barely scraped by on that. Hindsight 2020, probably would not have done a Kickstarter with that specific title, but would have approached a publisher instead for completion funding. But ultimately, with additional publisher interest, but not support, not financial support, but interest, we finally rounded out that game and ended up working with Sony as well to bring that to PS4 and Vita, which is currently in review for them. I also use that opportunity to show the capabilities of what Unity could do, but also what we could do as a studio with Unity. And we took that to Steam, went to talk to Valve, and became Steam publishers. And so that's why it's now available as a Steam product. Persistence and experience in the industry, knowing the right people to speak to, and building the right relationships. If anything, one of the takeaways I'd always say is don't be a dick. You would be amazed how powerful a reputation for being at least somewhat pleasant to speak to in this industry, how far that can go. At any game developers conference or game meetup or E3 or any other conference that occurs around the world, people will remember who you are by the way you present yourself and by the way you present your studio. My screen just went blank. There we go. I'm back. And so, talk about juggling and having to wear multiple hats. You got a tremendous amount of responsibility when it comes to not only designing and building a product, working with the team internally, and then managing the relationships you have in business as well as with consumers. One of the blessings of the last couple of years is the ability for small developers like ourselves, and like many of you, I'm sure, is you can go direct to consumers now. You can launch a product and go mobile. You can launch a product and go PC. You can launch a product and go console. But it's all down to you being responsible for all the things that publishers used to do for you. And one of those big ones is marketing and public relations, awareness building. And it takes a tremendous amount of time. Games have certainly moved from being a fire and forget product to a product offering as a service. And often what that means is you build a relationship with your customers, and part of that becomes your marketing and becomes your public relations. But it also becomes a longer tail of development and needing to build, maintain, modify, adapt, change, anything based on the majority of your users. Because changing games is not easy once they're launched. But if you're intelligently designing a system or building your code properly or using game engines like Unreal, like Unity, maybe Lumberyard, I can't honestly speak of that one yet. Then it's a little bit easier to move forward through the requests and the trends that you see. Follow the trend lines, follow what it is that your players are enjoying and give them more of that content. And in some ways, they almost become your public quality assurance department. But more importantly, they become your advocates. They become a community that supports you. And there certainly is a lot of trolling and hate on the internet as well. And the best way to deal with them is to just ignore them. I often say, if you send me an email to my inbox and you're not being a dick, I'll respond to you. If you send a Facebook message, I can't stand Facebook, but I will typically respond back in an official capacity from the company or as an individual capacity as a developer. If someone has an intelligent question. And I'm not even saying an intelligent in the sense of, they love everything that we do. I've had some great discussions with people who have very logical complaints, but they're respectful. If you're always respectful in your conversation, I will always respond. And so hence the people who are not, they get ignored. So good question, which popped up here. How do we do it? Trends. It's interesting. I'll deal with the first part of the question first. Dealing with trends, first you have to see them. First you have to identify them. And by trends, I mean trends specific to your games and what you are doing. I don't mean the trends of the industry. I'm not chasing virtual reality right now. I'm not chasing augmented reality, even though there's a tremendous amount of money being poured at it. And I certainly will take a safe bet on the industry trends when there's these massive VR funds to take existing products and take them and bring them to virtual reality. That's a safe investment. There are other companies that are doubling down completely on everything that the industry is saying is the future. And everyone's guessing. No one knows. Who knows what people are going to do or how they enjoy games, next week, forget next year. So do we try to go with them? No, we don't. But we're always conscious of them. So following and getting business with a trend. If you're speaking with a publisher or speaking with a specific vendor, I'll give you an example like Alienware. Alienware and their laptops, will often support as many controllers that are feasible with PC gaming and console gaming. And a lot of times it's using the right tools in our plugins in the case of Unity or Unreal so that it's easy to add and extend our architecture to support new devices, new controllers. And so when we approached Alienware, because they had some very specific high-end PCs, and some custom controllers. We said we can certainly create a customized version of that for what you're coming out with, what you're pushing, and what your next generation laptop. And so we can move quickly, but we don't necessarily do that from the get-go. We don't do it for free. If you're good at something, get paid for it. And it's easy to say that, obviously, if you have games that already exist. It's certainly much more difficult when you're chasing everything in the beginning. And yeah, trust me, I was there in the beginning trying to figure out who was going to pay us first. How are we going to get money to fund the company? And in that case, going with the safe bets, going with not your crowning achievement as a designer or the best looking product as a programmer or artist in the studio sense, but going with something that's a safe investment for someone who has money and they're looking to utilize your expertise as a game developer. You feed them what they're looking for, not what you want to do necessarily, but use that expertise, use that skill. And that's kind of key, again, getting back into why you should or should not be a game developer. Can you build products that is someone else's idea? If you can't, then I don't know if you necessarily should go down that road of becoming a professional game development studio, because it's not all about building just your games. You oftentimes will be approached by someone with a big bag of money or even a small bag of money, and you're looking at that, well, got no income coming in for the next few months. We're going to take that. It's not the most favorite job in the world, but it certainly will pay the bills. And so in that case, being aware of trends and being able to speak intelligently about where the industry is going and explaining why you think it may or may not be a good idea lends itself very well to business expertise that you can sell to other companies and even to publishers, because they're looking for developers who do follow the trends, who do understand what's happening for the industry. Heck, who would have guessed that Pokemon Go would have been a massive blowout success as it was? And looking at that game, it's very simple in design. The visuals are very basic. The characters obviously are modeled and they look good, but holy cow, I don't think anyone was ready for the phenomenal adoption on mobile devices. And so now you're going to see hundreds, if not thousands, of clones quickly following. And the other interesting thing, Pokemon Go is not innovative. There's been tons of AR products out there before. Absolutely, there's a tremendous amount of nostalgia to it as well, and it's an existing brand that has an existing following, and it's not a completely new product. I think one of the hardest things, occasionally when I'll teach courses at some of the local universities or community colleges, and I'll get a team of people together who are coming up with the next latest and greatest World of Warcraft clone, and they're going to blow them away with their awesome idea. Like, well, I hope you have $100 billion to unthrone the champion, because they have an existing market, an existing consumer base, and it takes time to build that up. Another very good friend of mine that I worked with many years ago at the previous console company, he broke off and went independent on his own with 10 years of experience under his belt, and decided to move up to New York and just work on an RPG that he thought would be really fun, and it was something that he had an interest in building technology as well as the game. Now, he had the experience, he had the expertise, and he had enough money to cover him not having to work for anyone for 2 years. It ended up taking him a little bit longer. He cashed in a lot of his 401k, but by the time he released a product, he had strategically been building up an interest with the community that was very passionate about RPGs. He didn't go after first-person shooter market. He didn't go after mobile. He didn't go after non-hardcore gamers. He was very distinct and very specific about targeting an audience that he was pretty sure would drop 20 to 30 bucks for his game when he finally released it. And so it was, probably 50 to 60,000 copies at launch, which a publisher would scoff at. But an independent one-person studio, 20 to 30 bucks minus the 30% share to the stores, he's set for at least the next couple of years. So you don't have to build the hit. You don't have to build Pokemon Go. You don't have to build of something that has the millions of followers. Because you're not going to beat Activision. You're not going to beat THQ when they existed. These are well-established studios that have, hundreds of millions of dollars that they drop into marketing to build those communities. And as a small developer, we just don't have that. Nor should we really try. I would much prefer to spend the hundreds of thousands of dollars that we may potentially have on development, and then maybe $10,000 if we can scrape by it for very targeted marketing. And so kind of back to the point with MechRunner and spending on the marketing and understanding how we promote and market things as a small studio. I hate spending money that's on anything other than internal development and on, quite honestly, salaries. It's the salaries of the full-time employees that build the games. Anything that's outside of that it's a hard return on that investment, on the money that we've very difficultly made trying to build other people's products. But in the case of MechRunner, a lot of what we've been doing is forging strategic alliances with large companies like Sony, like Microsoft, so that, yes, we certainly want to do an Xbox One version, we do a PS4 version, we support specific features, platform exclusive variants, not launching platform exclusive, but supporting specific features that gives them an easy reason to say, okay, we're not going to give you any money when you launch on our platform, but you're supporting us with a distinct feature, so we'll market it for you. We'll get the word out through our channels. We'll connect and promote it to all of our hundreds of millions of followers on PlayStation Network or Xbox Live. And that's probably the best investment you can make, not spending direct cash on a marketing campaign, but instead spending that cash on development features that hopefully will turn into marketable behaviors on these platforms. And you could continue extending that beyond even just the platform carriers like Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo. You can try to reach out to Apple if you had a good contact. Good luck with that. Certainly Google, there are game evangelists that are looking to help do promotions. There are services, and getting to mobile, it gets a little kind of fishy and a little slimy, I think, but starting to go different pay models and integrating different ad network features, and you certainly can get paid marketing dollars to do that, but you potentially devalue your brand if it becomes a different offering between what you're doing on one platform and what you're not selling on other platforms. But again, if you've got to find a way to get the word out, then oftentimes it's a decision that your users don't understand. And so you have to be careful not to completely alienate them. But going in and doing specific support for features that exist, sometimes that's not just how you pay the bills, but potentially how you cover the marketing expense. So another good question here. Just one. Oh, hopefully we have more. Thoughts on making games for OS X? Well, actually, you kind of answered the question in exactly the way you asked it. A lot of indie devs pushing forward, the large ones won't touch it. That, to me, is basically a blue ocean opportunity. Because if large publishers look at it, and it's kind of the same thing, if a large publisher, if you give them a projection on a game that you're trying to build, and you're saying, I expect to sell 50,000 units, they'll laugh you out the door. Like, they want something that's a million unit plus seller. They want something that's going to be a 10 times return on their investment of whatever they're going to give you as a studio. And so anything small or any platform like OS X that's not going to give them the return, they just ignore it. It's not worth their time. However, for small developers, for indies, that's just, that's the icing. If supporting, especially if we're using middleware, if supporting a platform, even Linux and Steam OS, these are relatively simple if you've been developing correctly in Unity or Unreal to convert, build, test. Oh God, please test. And then make sure your platform support features for controllers and save games are all compatible. then you hopefully, with less than a couple of days effort, can support additional platforms that are on par. They have a parity with what the PC Windows platform has. And then, yeah, there's no reason not to. There's more opportunity. Now, I'd probably say the opposite if you'd ask me, hey, Windows Phone, no one's going there. It's like, well, yeah, when's the last time you saw someone with a Windows Phone? And we tried it. We actually launched a couple of our games on Windows Phone, and we saw initial adoption that was fast and steady, and then it plummeted and died. I think I sold one copy of a product that's done over 500,000 units on other platforms. I sold one copy in the last 3 months on Windows Store for phones, which, holy cow. I'm glad we sold a few initially, otherwise that would have been a massive loss. So let's see, advice on wannabe indie dev, 10 advices. Make sure you know what the heck you're getting into. So the 10 advices: persistence, honesty, be honest with yourself. Is this truly something you not just want to do? Do you really think you can do this? Be honest with yourself. If you're putting your livelihood, everything you're going to do, not just, career-wise, but financially, making an income to pay whatever, rent and everything else that you have. Can you support yourself in building a product that's going to make enough to not just cover the expenses of what you built, what you spent to get there, but what you would do next? Ideally, as a small studio, what we're always looking at is building a product that covers the costs of what it was to build in the first place, ×2. Because you have to cover your expenses of what you've just done, and hopefully cover the costs of the sequel, of the next product. It doesn't have to be a sequel of the product you just launched, but what your next game is going to be. And that's massive. Some of the other points, don't forget, if you're a programmer, if you're an artist, you have your discipline. You have your expertise, your area that you work in. Even if you can do art and programming, you can't sacrifice that outward-reaching community management, the business side, the relationships, reaching out even to other developers. So if you don't have the 24 hours in a day to do all those things, because sleep does come and it is kind of needed, then you need to work with someone else. And you don't necessarily need to partner with someone, but you certainly need to reach out. And again, that networking experience, reaching out to the people who can help you when you need the help, when you need the advice, or you need the PR, or you need the marketing, or you need a consultant to assist. And it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. PR firms used to be tremendously expensive, but now we have a massive number of independent specialists who do PR on a month-to-month basis or project basis. And those are smart investments, because that money spent is basically the time that you're going to get to spend on development and doing what you want to do. I'm sure I'll hit a few more of these as we go on. But another question here: overcoming recession in the game industry. We don't really have a recession. So maybe, do you mean recession as far as the economy is concerned, or recession as far as, the trends and the way things change and the whims of consumers? Economic, yeah. So funny thing, I started this last company in 2008, probably the worst possible year to build a company. The wonderful thing, while most other industries were struggling, game industry was strong. Now, we're talking about entertainment, as a value to consumers. And because the industry has become socially acceptable on all levels, I mean, people who don't even define themselves as gamers. Your soccer moms, they play a tremendous number of casual games, and now it's mobile enabled. And so everyone has games on their phones. PC gaming is alive and well. Console gaming is alive and well. You have the trends of who's playing more on one platform versus another, but the overall count of people buying and enjoying entertainment content is higher than it ever has been before. and it's international. It's not just based in the U.S. And so, another little bit of advice, don't forget your international opportunities. It doesn't take much to prepare a product to be localizable and ready to launch on an international stage. One of the things I think I would say about trying to avoid or prevent being tied to any economic downturn is diversification, just like you would if you were doing any sort of investments in the stock market. So diversification as a developer. And this is something I didn't realize we were doing until, well, I look back at 2008 with, most of my other friends who started studios around that time, and they're all gone, and we're not. It was not an easy year or easy couple of years, but one of the things I think I realized that we did was diversify not just the types of games that we would work on, going for opportunities with companies, publishers who are looking to tap into what was popular at the moment. I just mentioned, casual gaming, web-based gaming, and mobile gaming took a big rise in 2008 till 2010. But diversification and using your skills as a game developer for non-gaming purposes. And that's kind of a realm of serious gaming. And I'll tell you right now, serious gaming doesn't have an industry. Serious gaming touches every industry. And I've made more money doing development in serious games than in all the combined PC products that I've done and mobile products as a studio in 8 years. And what I mean by serious games is education, healthcare, training, marketing applications, large corporations looking to spend money in their training budgets they've already allocated, marketing budgets for new products, employment onboarding, employment engagement, that nasty word of gamification. There are a massive number of companies, large companies, that are desperately trying to find ways to engage just with their employees. Forget getting a brand out there and aware. So having the ability to go and present not just yourself, but a potential portfolio. And I'll give you an example, 2 examples of serious gaming. There's a large group of hospitals in Minnesota that we built a iPad and web-based training simulator design in Unity for training nurses and doctors on various interactive behaviors for preventing diabetes or bed sores or pressure ulcers, falls prevention. And what they had traditionally before that were training modules, people who would go out and do these workshop sessions for $1 million, and we give them a product that serves all their needs and is takeaway and self-study paced for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's reusable and it's certifiable. It can be used towards course credits, and so it was a huge win for these organizations that were looking for something that could be done in training that was innovative and self-study. It's not always, and it's across the board, anything that you're doing that's not purely entertainment. Another one, Raytheon, a big government subcontractor for military and intelligence systems. They hired us to do an iPhone game that we couldn't call a game, we called it a simulation. But if you remember, I think it was 2010, there was a game called Flight Control that was done by a studio out of Australia. Really fun little game. You were basically vectoring planes and landing them. And so we did a version that was not tracing the path for planes to follow, but we did a version that would allow air traffic controllers to use this little interactive radar and issue commands to airplanes at altitudes and vectors on approach. And this was massively successful from a training perspective for this company because, again, FAA sends their standard trainees down to some base on Area 51 or somewhere in the desert, for a week at a time, and they're spending hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on these traditional training simulators, which means an instructor is standing there lecturing for hours and hours about how to do this stuff. And instead, well, I shouldn't say instead, augmenting that experience and giving all the trainees iPhones or iPod Touches where they can learn the basics of what it means to do vector control, vectoring and landing with the whole radar array. It's game design, we're building it just like we build a game, using game technology, using game art, but it never went to the public. And so that meant we had a very specific set of requirements and a very specific budget. And when we were done, we wiped our hands, finished. Thank you for the check, cash the check, move on. Don't have to worry about support, don't have to worry about anything. If anything, hopefully additional work. And so diversification into serious games and doing things slightly outside of what you're doing as a developer, it doesn't mean you stop building your games. It just means you can find other ways to make money off of your skills. And the way to get more of those projects, it's quite honestly, you look at things working for any companies, look at their training manuals and PowerPoint slides and presentations. They'll put you to sleep. But if you approach a company with an opportunity to build something interactive and, God forbid, fun, holy cow, someone's having fun doing this. Oh, it sells itself. It's brilliant. So I don't actively even promote the fact that we do a tremendous amount of that as a studio, but it is easily one of the, if not the top, it's one of the top 3 reasons why we are still in business. People not wanting to spend as much money on games anymore means we've got to make money from something else. So, yeah, I know. How dare they have fun? Yeah, I have fun all the time, but I get away with it because I just don't care. So, let me think. What other words of wisdom or any other questions? These are great questions. Y'all got some awesome stuff. Y'all got some funny names too. I like that. Indie games, indie development it's going to be here forever. One of the greatest compliments I think I ever heard from one of the Sony expos that we went to were from Activision, not in an official capacity, I can never quote them directly, but Activision and one of the larger game journalists. They were looking at the latest and greatest Call of Duty, NBA, whatever, FIFA, and they come over to the indie, area. And so you see all the Assassin's Creed, you see the very safe, big budget games. And then you come over and you see things you just can't expect to believe in the indie game showcase. It's the experimental games. It's pushing the limit. It's one of the core reasons why I think a lot of developers got into games in the first place. You're doing things that no one else is doing. You're pushing the envelope in what's fun. And God, hopefully making money with it. But indie game developers are the innovators. Large studios, if they have shareholders, they have budgets, they're going to play it safe. And they're going to follow a playbook. Why does Madden football come out every year, almost the exact same time, with very little innovation? One, there's an audience that'll buy it, and they'll pay $60 a year. And 2, you don't mess with the NFL franchise. And so EA would never touch that thing. So there's not going to be innovation. It's going to be slow innovation, if anything. But as an indie game developer, heck, you got no one to answer to. So have fun, be experimental. And don't forget the essence of why you decided to get into it. Run it as a business. Don't forget to have fun in doing it. And make sure you know who your audience is. So that's maybe another advice as well. Know your audience. You're not going to sell the world. But find your audience, engage with them, empower them, work with them, and hopefully they'll help carry you as long as you listen and support them. More questions. Got more people typing. I can type back too. Marketing for very early game development. Well, I'll give you maybe a slight case study there without specifically mentioning the title. My biggest advice on marketing for early game development is be very careful. It's probably the same advice I'd give to an artist. If you're trying to show a portfolio, show only your best stuff. It's not about quantity, it's about quality. So you want to show some early game development. And the first thing you need to ask yourself is, do you have anything that's worth showing? And what are you trying to achieve? If you're trying to build a community, I think you can start talking about it, but you need to seed that. You need to seed it with people who are not going to just disregard what you're trying to do. So be very, very careful. Don't let it derail, your vision. Now, on the flip side, if you're looking to, potentially build a community that will guide and assist you in developing, um, hopefully you've got something that is interesting enough where you can build an audience, a small audience, but start small and build up. Don't try to go out to the masses. You're going to have a very separate and different campaign when you launch a title. And so you need to ask yourself, why are you trying to market it? Are you trying to get assessment of the validity of your idea? Are you trying to get support potentially to do early access or greenlight? Are you thinking about going Kickstarter, run screaming, trying to wrestle bears? I mean, figure out what you're reasoning first. So there was a very well-known title that had a big license with a company called Fox that they decided they wanted to start talking about the fact that development started early on that game. And yeah, see, I figured you'd mention that. So yeah, Firefly was announced, and Fox wanted to talk about it. The second the license was talked about from a licensing perspective with the developer, and that's the absolute worst time to be doing it because the design's not even done. There's not enough content to feed a community, especially a voracious and awesome community, but a community that wants to know everything there is to know about Firefly. And all you can say is a game started. And that was very much an early, oh no, what were they thinking? And we were all shaking our heads at the studio going, why are they talking about this when we have just barely started putting pen to paper in a design form on the game? And that continued because once you let that cat out of the bag, holy crap, good luck getting it back in. It ain't going in. And so when you go down that road, you've opened a door and a path that you can't pull back on. Because if you stop giving updates, people get mad. If you get stuck with a gag order, you can't say anything. Hence the case in our example. We can't actually talk about anything specifically on Firefly related to the game that's in development. I can talk about historical experiences, and one of them obviously being, don't talk about it before it's ready. Working with a great crew and working with the actors and working with the brand and the fans. I mean, it's probably one of the most enjoyable games I've ever done. But it's also the most dangerous. Working on the original, well, how would you say the new actors? There are new actors. They're all the original actors. Oh, with Will? Yeah. Actually, it's funny. I was talking to Courtney Taylor yesterday. She's still doing a tremendous amount of incredible voice work. And, we had her and Will at Comic-Con, not last year, but the year before. And they, what's funny about them, probably more Will than with Courtney. Courtney is she's a big lover of video games. Damn, that woman's got serious energy. She is just fanatic. And she did a wonderful job as Jack previously. But Will Wheaton was interesting because he's a huge Firefly fan. And so it was extremely easy getting him into character because he already had the passion. I mean, they're all professionals. Alan Tudyk, I think, is the most impressive out of all of them because the man works like no one's business. He's so dedicated, and his energy level is incredible in everything he does, Firefly or Con Man. But Will, when we had him in the studio, yeah, he really is Con Man. He really is. And we had a little cameo, actually, a little tangent there. There's one of the episodes in the first series that we have a booth in one of the shows. And so a couple of us flew out for filming that day, and that's where I got to see Alan firsthand in action. And the man, I mean, I wouldn't say perfectionist in a bad way, but he is dedicated to the art of cinematography, and he absolutely loved everything he was doing, and he was wonderful to work with. We were very honored to be invited to come out and and be in one of their extras. But the Will was funny because I think as a massive Firefly fan, he just fell into the role. And you listen to the recordings that he's doing as the main actor, and it's hard to actually recognize him as Will Wheaton because he fits this personality so well of the character that we injected into the Firefly verse. And it took very little directing. So I love working with them. And, you know, as a crazy hardcore geek and a massive follower of Firefly, you know, I get giddy every single time I got to listen to the actors speaking the voiceovers. You know, I think I've gotten past the point of playing the random strings that we have loaded into the game. But there for a couple of months, you know, I just go through and randomly load up, not just hearing the voices, but the writing. One of the biggest things I think, and it's tremendous credit to the designer of the game, Adam, the writing flows so well with Firefly, and it brought it to life again. So it's a danger, you know, dealing with, I think it's J.J. Abrams said it very well too, you know, in working on Star Wars. It's a blessing and a curse because you work with something that you're so passionate about and you love as a fan, but you're having to look at it professionally and you have to make those valid judgment calls from a business perspective on creating a product. I absolutely understand what he means because, you know, now I can't say anything about what's going on because of Fox. You know, and as a fan, it drives me insane. You know, there's so much that I want to talk about, so much that I want to show that we're not allowed to. And Fox, they're not being dicks. They're just a big business. They're a corporation. And so I don't slight them for it. I understand their business rationale and I respect it. They have a lot more lawyers than I do. You know, I have one part-time that I try not to pay when I don't have to, but lawyers are expensive. Avoid them if you can. Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, they work on Firefly, pick MechRunner. Holy cow, yes. It would trump a lot of the ability we had to be able to talk about development on MechRunner because of things that we were doing with Firefly. And there were different teams, but some of the core company members, the managers, were involved in overseeing both projects. And so it certainly made it difficult not being able to talk about something in one because we were focused on another and then shifting vice versa. As far as influencing, I think if anything, it benefited. So MechRunner was built before Firefly, and a lot of the expertise and experience that we got in Unity and all the tools that we developed for MechRunner definitely made it easier to do some of the things in Firefly that we were doing. Especially, you know, the Cortex application that was built, had we not been so experienced having worked with Unity developers directly because of MechRunner, it would have been a lot more difficult to release even a mobile product as fast as we did with the level of customization and updates that went into it. And so I think that's a credit just to good development practices. You know, if you're a developer, be lazy. Don't write code you don't need to. You know, the best code in the world is the code you don't write. You don't have to debug it. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to maintain it. You don't have to modify it. So keep all those things in mind as you're developing products. You know, reusable code where it makes sense is great. Your core game content is obviously going to be built per game, but the experiences, in as much as you get as a developer working on something, the tools that you create to make your development easier and more lazy, you absolutely need to carry over between projects so you're not reinventing the wheel. Like, unless you've got some massive compelling reason, geez, do not build your own technology. There's no reason to. I had someone ask me about that yesterday, who's been in the industry for a while. Like, I'm thinking about building an engine. Like, well, you know, if you have some reason why you're going to make an offering that is competitive that's not out there, great. But don't go there if you don't have to. Heck, it's unbelievable how free everything is now. And, you know, Unreal and Unity are definitely two products that we license and we maintain regularly because they save us a tremendous amount of time in working on these games that we love. What else we got? More typing. Hardest part while developing Firefly and MechRunner. So hardest part as far as the development challenges, technically, or from a business perspective, artistically, what would you define as saying hardest? Business. So cash flow management and staffing. Those are the hardest parts because at one time we were up to 30 people, and managing that as a small business without having HR, it put a lot of responsibility on the teams. It had put a lot of responsibility on the producers behind those teams to keep us all on track. And just knowing where we could manage our cash flow in as intelligent a way as possible. Because building both of those games, obviously, we're not covering the cost of running a business of paying for 30 people. 30 people is expensive. So we had to have a smaller team, in addition to that, continuing to work on serious games. And so you're juggling constantly the priorities between these so that you can keep your core teams focused on those products while, I don't know, making things like payroll happen. The games themselves are not hard. I mean, that's what's fascinating. Some people had less than a year of experience. Others of us had 20 plus years. And so we knew what we were doing in building products and doing art and, having contractors. The team was all around the world. There's people we work with who, as far as Australia, a couple in Europe, and then the majority in the US and Canada. But just being able to manage that from a cash flow perspective, it's a royal nightmare. I absolutely hate it. And I'd love to say we're financially rich, but no, cash flow, we're month to month. I couldn't tell you where income's coming in by the end of the year, but somehow we figure it out. Again, diversification into series games helps a lot of that, but you got to have kind of a very thick skin and strong will, being able to continue driving forward and inspire confidence and being able to do that. There's a lot of times we didn't have it. We had to float over a month, with nothing. So, biggest game I've worked on in the career. Biggest game. So big would be units sold or just size of code. Civilization 2 is probably, the biggest and most successful that I was involved with. And, that certainly had the farthest reach of PC game of anything I've touched. Millions and millions of players. Very, very good game. Absolutely horrific code base. Actually, it was something I had to deal with the first week on the job, was going through and reading what was called SID code. Sid Meier did a lot of coding in the early versions of Civilization, and he's not a programmer, he's a designer. He's a brilliant designer, incredible mechanics, but he'd write code, and the code was horrible, and it wasn't documented, and the variables were not named. They'd have iterative, 4 deep iterative loops with variables that you just couldn't figure out what they were. And at one time, the team, we were speaking with Sid, and he was explaining that a lot of the approach was because he looked at programming and code as a prototyping tool to building the fund. And absolutely, when he got it, it worked. It was incredible. But holy cow, debugging those systems. Ooh. So we spent a lot of time, but very successful product. Another, I'd say, I think Robotech Battlecry was very successful, and that was my first console game that I worked on in 2001, and that was a tremendous amount of fun. As a Robotech fan, that was another kind of fan geek out favorite. I had a chance for a while to work on Spy vs. Spy. It was a remake done for the Xbox, and that was based on Mad Magazine's Spy vs. Spy. That was really the biggest development challenge from artificial intelligence, and that was an area that I got involved with, I thought was my area of expertise in game development, was mechanics and AI, and I certainly put that to the test. I was just recently reminded of a failed XCOM game that I was part of, XCOM Interceptor, which was a crazy hybrid strategic flight sim version that we did. And the AI in that game was so good that you could basically launch the missions and just sit back and watch it defeat the enemy for you. And so I was talking to the designer, and he said, I need to go dig that code up and sell it to the government. We could stick that in the drones, there'd be no more wars. They'd just fight each other. So that was certainly another large scale one. And then, so different from the smallest. So we've had some games that took only a couple of weeks, and they're mobile games. Some were based on match 3 mechanics that we did when we worked with Puzzle Quests and doing Puzzle Quests with Namco. And actually, a lot of the Puzzle Quest code, the Puzzle Quest Match 3 engine, we got pulled into doing Match 3 games for a little while, and so we could throw together a Match 3 game in no time at all, a couple of weeks, and release that. And it's interesting because of the large games I mentioned, like Civilization, Spy vs. Spy, and Robotech, those are 3 games I think from the size and time spent on them. The fascinating thing is I would still enjoy, with an asterisk by enjoy, I would enjoy going back and playing those again, where other games I've spent so much time on it I don't want to work on them anymore. And the smallest ones, same thing. They're quick and easy. So, a quick, simple, fun match 3 game, it's a time waster, and I'm not too concerned that I spent a little bit of time on it. I'm not burnt out on it. Burnt out is probably the best term. So, yeah. What else we got? People are falling off slowly. All the cool people are still left, right? Bacon Goddess. I love that name. Bacon's cool. My coffee stopped. Yay. Everybody else got any questions? Don't make me sing, because I don't. Start throwing tomatoes. Yeah, everyone's like, it's hot if you're outside. Yeah, cool. Well, no, I enjoyed this. And like I said, you all have questions or things. I'm quite honest. If you email me, I will answer you. Just don't be a dick. Twitter, you can do Sparkplug Games or MechRunner SPG. I think they may be on. Jesse may have thrown them up somewhere. If I actually tweeted anything. I'm more old school. I think I'm still. I've got multiple screens open, and one of those screens is never social media. It's probably code and code articles and games. Most excited about in the future that more and more people are playing games. That it's a socially acceptable form of entertainment, and we have a massive audience. We have the world stage now, so the opportunities for small development are becoming greater and greater every day. Not to say the challenges aren't also growing in getting the word out and getting the awareness out, but it's my excitement is never about a specific technology or a specific game. It's about the trend of the industry in general. It's about the trend of consumers. Consumers enjoy games, and they're going to play things, and new innovative ideas. If they go and they become sticky and go viral, it takes off. Who's to say Flappy Bird? There's another Flappy Bird out there. There's another VR headset. There's another AR game. Pokemon Go is opening up new opportunities. So it's growing. It's a great place to be if you can at least support yourself to get started, and don't get too big ahead. Just continue smoothly. Build and engage with an audience, and don't be a dick. Yay. Yeah, totally my pleasure. My pleasure. Absolutely. Great questions. I mean, I definitely enjoyed this. And thanks for sitting around and listening to me ramble on. And thanks for being a part of the community. You know, build a community, be out there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I'll shoot you a message here in just a couple minutes as well and say hi. Otherwise, we all want to thank you. You've given a lot of insight, a lot of work. Other than that, we will have an announcement, guys, at 3:30 p.m. We're going to be talking a little bit about the GoFundMe and the raffle giveaway going on this week, and that'll be at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And immediately after that, Greg Zeschuk will be joining us, the former co-founder of BioWare. He'll be giving some words of wisdom from his experiences at BioWare and just working in the games industry. But other than that, stay tuned. Join in the discussions. Join in over there. We're going to be giving away a giveaway here in just a minute. We're going to do, I'm thinking, Rise of the Triad promo code by Apogee Games, donated by Apogee Games, just so you know. And we'll be setting that up here in just a moment. Otherwise, stay tuned.